And here we are. So I just want to thank our good friend Xander for putting that together. It is still very much work in progress, but that's the stuff that we have going on, and a little sneak peek of what we have going on here in the New Templars and in the Mystery School. So without further ado, let's get started with today's topic. Cryptids, creatures of the night. So the best way... So what is a cryptid? The hell is this? What can we, kind of describe from this? And it's funny because I also want to thank everybody who participated in the poll, because it seems like a lot of people do, but it's fascinating because 5% don't and 42% kind of don't really know. They have an idea, but they're not sure. So from that perspective, it's very half and half. And this is 60 people that voted, and I thank all of those people that voted. And with that, we can kind of look at the perspective of, okay, we have an understanding of what these are, what these are supposed to be, how they interact with us in this dimension, if they're multidimensional, what kind of understanding can we get from that? I'm going to throw that on. And Junk, what kind of understanding can we get from that?
Well, I think it's fair to say that there is a curiosity about what the cryptids are. And of course, this covers a broad range of creatures. I believe when we get into the meat of it, cryptids are the unknown. It's the mystery, it's hearsay, it's stories around the campfire, and it's in movies. It's all around us. And so that prompts a necessity to look deeper into these topics that are usually taboo or basically just condemned for even studying in the first place. So that's why I think the drive is there, that people don't want to give up all of it because a history book told them or some political figure said, hey, you shouldn't believe this. I think this is something that people really are optimistic about, and they want to get to the bottom of it. And I think we all do eventually. And seeing how many people are just unsure is a great kind of balancing period where we can have schools like this or conversations to really highlight the truth that's beneath the cracks. And I'm very, very excited to see that a lot of people are studying and are looking forward to subjects like these, because this is the stuff that really matters. This is the reality to our surreality. And I'm very, very excited to get right on into it. So fascinating poll.
All right, wonderful. So, as I asked before, let me just still setting some things up here in the background on my apologies. Okay, so as I asked before, why did I do that? Okay. What could, be considered a cryptid? What standards are there to be classified as a cryptid? So, is Bigfoot a cryptid? Is how, I don't mean to jump around here with the questions, but just putting it in a broad term, acting like the idiot here. What certain characteristics of an entity does it need to have in order for it to be considered a cryptid? Can it just be any type of, abnormal, paranormal, or supernatural type of entity? Or does it have to have very specific features? Because from my very brief understanding, and I call brief as maybe 3 days. So they take on very different, type of ideas. You got, chupacabra, you have Bigfoot, you have Loch Ness Monster. And, just those three alone have very different characteristics within their own mythology itself. How could they be considered the same thing? Junk, can you help me answer that?
Yeah, I think when studying the characteristics of cryptids, the most notable is the anonymity. Lots of them have kind of an obscurity about their presence, whether they're elusive, lucrative. Chances are it's very rare to catch one on camera, let alone video. And most cryptids spread through story, through folktale, through word of mouth. And that's what truly brings the mystery into this. So I think if there's a mysterious creature that is almost otherworldly, other dimensional, it's going to create a lot of stir in the collective consciousness and therefore perpetrate that idea throughout the collective. So I think having a kind of an unknown factor about it, you can consider a lot of these creatures cryptids, but each of them is distinctly their own being. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. But I think it goes under three different variables, which is one, very elusive, hard to take track of, hard to verify their existence. Number two is having some kind of otherworldly features, if that means different kind of body parts spliced together, which is very abnormal for regular animals that we know in the animal kingdom. Or three is the actual interaction with these creatures. Typically, when we talk about cryptids, and we'll get into the specifics of that, but talking about cryptids in general, there is a fear factor. These aren't things that you generally want to approach, or let alone have approach you. So in that regard, we could see cryptids as a fear of the unknown. And yeah, we'll just dive in deeper, but that's pretty much the foundation right there.
And like everything, I'd say when it comes to ETs or spirits, just as cryptids, there are both good and bad and possibly neutral ones as well. But did you want to segue into the first question, or should we just shoot off from here?
We're on to the second question, but
yes.
So, all right.
Wait, Scoop, you want to show the world view?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And we have a couple of those too.
I will premise this by saying cryptids are not local to the United States. Okay, this is a worldwide phenomena. And in just a moment, you're going to see the diversity all across the map of how widespread these sightings are and these stories. So to chuck it out to somebody hoaxing it is very ignorant. We have to stay very open-minded here and realize that this has been going on for centuries, if not thousands of years. This isn't something in the modern age with cameras or replicating equipment. These are genuine stories that pass through family bloodlines, and I think that should be taken with considerable decency in knowing that maybe having that perspective that maybe you don't know everything and maybe that the mystery is out there is something that we should check out. Oh no, Scoop, the world map of the cryptids.
I've been sent so much information.
It's at the bottom left. It's right before the video on the bottom. And then you could just scroll through the different countries.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see here, they cover all different continents, and I'm not sure, Scuba, if you can see, but we can go through those.
Yeah, it's a little blurry, but it's okay. So it seems like you got Wendigos here, mainly in Canada. I wouldn't know what these would be called. A little blurry there. Sasquatch.
Well, when you go through the slides, it shows where each of them are from in greater detail.
Gotcha. So okay, so this is just the overview. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's basically just showing you that they're everywhere. Okay, this isn't like an uncommon phenomena or a rare sighting. This is very frequent, and these tales and memories span hundreds, if not thousands, of years.
Did we already get into how they manifest, or how sightings happen?
I mean, you can go into it.
So, since I missed the Bigfoot question, I just wanted to add that there are theories out there, and a lot of people agree on this, is that Bigfoot is an interdimensional entity, meaning that's why it's so elusive, is because Bigfoot actually kind of phases in and out of our reality, for whatever reason. And there's also people who are avid Bigfoot hunters, so to speak, say that if you see orange orbs in the forest, that is a good indication actually of Bigfoot either is, or is about to manifest, or has a presence there. And so when we get into other types of cryptids, there's positive and negative ones, they manifest in different areas or for different reasons, such as the rake. It's this one cryptid. I kind of researched it a lot because I saw this really cool video on it. But certain, I guess, energies, such as alcoholism or just like a lot of negativity in an area, can actually allow some sort of cryptid to manifest itself around the area. But I don't know if that's to say all cryptids are interdimensional, or if there are some that are actually I don't want to say native to our plane of existence, but more so along those lines. But let's get into this map here.
Junk, do you want to go over it?
Yeah, so basically right now you're looking at the North and South America map. And if you can't read, I'll actually read out a bunch of them for you. We have Sasquatch in North America, obviously. We have the Wendigo in Canada. We have Kitizal, which we didn't feature, but that is in Mexico. It's, again, a type of dragon. I could be butchering this, but Yunkia from El Salvador. And then just kind of hopping around a little bit, the Jumbi, El Baca, Tata, and then over to South America, we have Tundo in Colombia, Water Tiger, Ecuador, Muki in Peru. So basically what we're looking at is, in general, a bunch of beings that kind of subtly resemble different animals, but in a more distorted kind of way, in that there's something clearly indicative that they are not of the same breed, or let alone the same species, which is why they've kind of had this notorious title given to them as cryptids. And these are told not just in major cities, but in small communities such as tribes, and it's all word to mouth, word to ear. And I think this is just absolutely fascinating to see, because it's not as simple as a simple fairy tale. They're literally killing animals in some cases, where you can be a shepherd and half your flock goes, mass murdered when you wake up in the morning. So these are very real effects that take place in the communities. And we'll dive a little bit deeper, but Scoop, if you want to transition, we have Asia, Europe, and then Oceania also.
You jogged my memory of a story. There was a legend of a group of scientists doing research in Russia during the Cold War era, and they ended up all going missing, and they actually found that some of them were killed and brutally murdered. And there was a group of remote viewers who did kind of like an experiment to see how the hell, what happened to these guys. They actually found out that the scientific experiments that they were conducting were causing havoc on the local area where a Yeti was living, and it actually came and killed the local scientists that were there that were doing the military experiments. So yeah, that's one story of a cryptid wrecking havoc that I had heard about.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, real world effects. These aren't just stories. There's physical, tangible evidence and proof of their existence and their rampage in some cases. So now moving on to Europe. Very interestingly, these are a lot of names that you've heard, and remember, when there's a notorious name for a character, entity, or theme idea, it usually spans the test of time. So, for example, we have dragons in Wales, we have gargoyles in France, we have let me see what else, griffin in Greece, we have werewolves in Latvia, and it goes on and on and on. And that's why it's really important to think that these wouldn't be the case. If normality was the consensus, then all of these quote unquote fictitious stories would be kind of left for dead. But somehow they penetrate into not only modern day, but into our culture. I mean, you see a lot of these things all around, like dragons, that has never gone away. And so it begs the question, are these real tales that has been actual real part of history that the powers that be have since erased? Or are they just figments of somebody's imagination? And it's hard to agree with the latter, there's just too many recounts of each of these in succession. So you can move on to the next one. So we have Middle East and Central Asia. Again, another dragon in Turkey. So what does that tell you? It spans the continents. We have the jinn in Lebanon, which are kind of like genies. We have again the griffin in Egypt. So again, spanning continents, kind of moving through the countries. And it just goes on and on and on. And again, I mean, we're basically presenting you this information to kind of crack that eggshell of skepticism, because you're here to understand the truth. Again, that's all Scuba, I, and the Templars provide, is being here to be the ones that are actually going to set you on the right path. And this is the occult, hidden mystery truth of why you're in this school. So I think this is just an absolutely great overview of how widespread cryptids are. And we're going to dive even deeper. There's another one from Oceania, which is basically the ocean continents out there, as you'll see in just a moment. And so with Oceania, again, we're seeing more dragons. In Thailand, there's one called Phaya Naga, which is kind of like a sea serpent. And we have different big crocodiles, another dragon in Macau. So again, at this point, it should be fairly apparent that dragons, at least one time in history, have existed. We also have mermaids from the Marshall Islands, in which we will cover a little bit later on. And then, yeah, it's, again, all different interpretations of the same exact phenomena. So try to connect the dots and see how they're all interconnected, because getting this overview really allows us to see through many eyes at once.
Xenox, you got a lot of background noise. right, sorry about that. A little bit of a hiccup there. So, actually, let me do this. That was wrong move. Let me do this. Back to the questions. So, as Junk just went into, it spans the entire world. So, as an overview, we kind of gave you a very good gist in terms of, you know, what might be considered one, the regions where it might lie. And the fascinating thing to me is that I saw some things on the list that I didn't even think of to consider as a cryptid. Like, for instance, a djinn. I always thought of it as like a dark form of a genie in that area, the Middle Eastern lore. I never thought of it as being, you know, a type of cryptid creature. I always thought of it as like a supernatural creature, more or less, in terms of mystical, you know, magic, not necessarily, you know, something dark and kind of spooky per se. But it's fascinating to me, you know, to really sit here and think about. And, you know, now I think we should turn the gears towards talking about some specifics. So what would be considered the scariest and most bloodthirsty out of known?
Do you want to go back to the second question?
I mean, we kind of talked about it, really.
I know you missed the slides. We have like a bunch of them.
Oh. So let's, I mean, we're going to go into specifics of different ones now, but okay. Let's do this one here. All right. So, who wants to talk about Sasquatch? Junk, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sasquatch, better known as its nickname Bigfoot, is a very interesting phenomena that is more or less locally derived from forested regions or very kind of off the beaten path places. And it's interesting too, because like I did some research into this, and you have different sightings. So in Oregon, there's 1,009 sightings. In Ohio, there's 1,042, and it just goes on and on and on. And seeing this phenomena is absolutely fascinating, because if you ask me my honest opinion, just as Xenox mentioned a little earlier, is that I don't quite consider Bigfoot a cryptid. There's a very stark difference. Namely, one of the biggest ones is that Bigfoot is not necessarily to be feared. It's an elusive presence, yes, but it's not going around to conquer, kill, and terrify people. People are going to find it, and that is the difference. It's the intention behind that. So, speaking quickly on the characteristics of Bigfoot, again, very elusive, quiet, hidden, hide and seek champion of the world. Basically, Bigfoot, as we know it, can be seen only through its trackings, and that goes as far as maybe broken branches, footsteps in mud, loud howling sounds, because they do communicate out loud. There's a very verbal element to Sasquatch. And they also are found to move in families, which I don't think people think about. Lots of people, when you consider Sasquatch, you would think is like a lone wolf kind of thing, but they actually have packs. And it's very fascinating to see this and to even think or comprehend what would be the case in that scenario. But one thing we do know is that they are very, very intelligent. They are so careful about where they are and how they interact with nature. And so you can actually switch. There's another graphic that has different areas of where they were found, and It should be like a forest one. It's like 2 graphics, but I can go into that. I'm going to pull it up on my screen. So basically, when we look at both Bigfoot, we find them in forestry, right? So you can think about the topography of the United States as more so coastal and southern. So when we kind of go up California Trail up into Oregon and above, very dense forested regions, which actually allows for, you know, a lot of hiding spots to say the least, but more so a communication with nature because there is a hive mind. I mean, you have to realize that the forest connects and communicates with itself through networks of mycelium, which are embedded beneath the surface that span miles and miles and miles. So it begs the question, are Sasquatch in contact with fungi? And that's a whole different that's a whole nother conversation, but I just want to plant that seed. And then another one too that's super fascinating that we kind of made the connection to is that they're also drawn to the heaviest, dense parts of the topography that contain a lot of rainfall. And so you have canopy cover from the trees, and you also have rainfall, which is, kind of life, its essence, water and earth. And from my own kind of channeling and experience of Sasquatch is that rather um, than a cryptid, they are more so, in my definition terminology, considered an elemental, which, as Xenox alluded to earlier, is more of an interdimensional nature. It's something where they are not necessarily bound to this dimension. They just pop up and they're more so considered the protectors of nature, if that makes sense. So to be considering that they would be within forested regions means that they would be protectors of the forest. And this could be anything from healing after a forest fire, or just communicating with the plants, or keeping the synergy of the regeneration cycle of the seasons, which is an absolutely fascinating concept to ponder. But regardless, they're here, they're seen. And again, it's not just local to the United States. Another thing that Xenox mentioned earlier was that there is the case of the Yeti. And the Yeti are almost, you can consider them cousins of Sasquatch, the more snowbound, bipedal figures that appear in the Alps, that appear in these really dense kind of just like uninhabitable regions of the ice and the snow and the mountains. So both are connected, both have the same elusive nature, but it is known that, or at least in my opinion, that there is a differential, that they are not trying to harm us in any way. If that was the case, they would have overrun the cities, because these things, if you really rack up their size, they're 7+ feet tall. Like, they're not giants, but they're big. They're very, very big, and they have a massive presence, and they've been known to communicate with animals because there is that medium. So I think, when you have Bigfoot sightings, I know we've all seen videos. Chances are the dogs are going to go crazy, the cats are going to look out the window, the birds might react differently. So there's definitely that connection, but there's also the preference that they are not spotted, therefore avoiding human contact at all costs. And yeah, we can get into that as we go along.
So are there any comments, questions, or concerns so far? Xander, do you have anything to ask?
Well, I guess I wouldn't necessarily not ask, but what I would add is Junk's point about them being able to overpower us and take over, or at the very least cause heavy damage if they wanted to. I never thought about that. It's actually very true. It looks like we seem to always go to them and bother them, and they kind of just want to be left alone. I think that's interesting. Also, the part of them being interdimensional, or what did you say, elemental? Um, Interesting to think about them as spiritual creatures or some sort of frequency hopping creature. Never thought about that. It's interesting.
Thank you for that, Xander. Andrew, do you have anything to comment on Bigfoot?
No, just to add, it's like you would have to consider Sasquatch as like the supreme grounding being. You know, just add that too, and you know, it's just they've. I don't know. It just has to be like the ultimate grounding machine, and the fact that they stay in heavily rained out places or whatever. I mean, that's kind of smart because it washes away their tracks. And you see the videos of like I've seen a couple of them where it's always around rivers, so you kind of just have to notice that noise or whatever of the river is pretty much like you snuck up on each other. And then the ones where the Yeti of the like climbing the mountains in record times, like, you know, with the hikers out there, and they're just filming it, and they know how to hike, and this thing is just climbing this mountain in no time at all. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, and it just brought me back to like when I went on a family trip to Africa. It wasn't a jaguar, it was a leopard or whatever, going up on the mountain and everything, and you'd see it in one section of the mountain, and then it would just like disappear, and you'd have to find it, and it would be on the total opposite side. So like they have their patterns of doing things all the time, and it must be a with the family thing, like just family tradition of being elusive. And that's basically it. It's just the same stuff that you guys are saying.
No,
But
Well,
I do love
speaking-
the creature, like Gigantopithecus. Don't know if that's real or not, but yeah, it's just a really cool being. That's it.
Well, Andrew, you brought up a good point, which is the river crossings. It not only dissipates the tracks, but offers kind of this ambient sonic acoustic coverage that can allow them to kind of traverse, if need be, on foot. So, Scuba, we actually have one of the most common videos that I'm sure everybody's seen by now, which is the let me think, Patterson Gimlin film. Again, this was shot on film in 1967, and the video we're about to show is a stabilization of that footage. And there's a lot of controversy over this, of course, whether it was kind of recreated by a man in a suit, but I actually have some interesting takes. So, Scuba, if you want to put the video on and then we can discuss it, it'll be good.
Yeah, I'm still grabbing it here.
So as you see, he's crossing, the supposed Sasquatch is crossing a riverbank. And something that I absolutely found, because, you know, a lot of people say this could be faked. It's a guy in a suit. You have to realize that costumes during the 60s were very volatile, weren't as sophisticated as what we have in modern day. And also, something I noted as I started watching it over and over and over again, it's a very subtle detail, and you'll notice it right there. But it basically shows that in the way the Sasquatch swings its arms, look for it on the leg right there. You'll see there is a brief disturbance of the fur, which would happen over time if it was walking long distances and there was a lot of friction. So to me, that shows that there might be some credibility here, especially in the case that, Sasquatch were never really confronted with technology before, and we're talking early 60s or late 60s. So we're kind of looking at something where they might just slowly be adapting to the advancements of technology and humanity, and therefore aren't as worried or considerate to the recording of them, which could make even another credible situation. But this thing, especially when they started to frame it and they did different scans from the trees and the lengthening, I believe they caught this being at 8 foot. So it's a very tall creature, and it's also I just find the disturbance in the fur on the outside of the thigh on the right leg, you'll see right there, to be a little bit more credible, because if this was a fake, if this was an inauthentic kind of just gag, chances are they wouldn't go to that great of detail or even have the consideration to do something like that. And that's why it makes me believe that this could, in fact, be real. And it's very fascinating to ponder, especially when you realize that you're like looking at Bigfoot. So just extend your mind, traverse the imagination, and just think about how you would react if this was a real film. How would your emotions be? What do you feel inside? And I want to get everybody else's opinions on this because I'm very curious.
So definitely somebody who's seeing this for the first time, I want to just say, although yes, the argument, oh, it's a man in a costume. The 8 foot tall thing kind of makes sense, because one thing that you gotta pay very interesting attention to is its shadow. It's very faint, but you can see it, and that tells a lot. It tells a lot of the situation. It tells a lot of, the scale of the being. Also, I want to make note, he's very dirty. Very, 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 very dirty. It's all up his back. You can pretty much see that either that's dirt, grime, or whatever else, but he is not fully clean. I mean, one could say, all right, the guy in the mask rolled around in the mud. Okay. He would do that for dramatic effect, sure, but he's got to pay for that costume to get cleaned. It just doesn't feel practical just to lie around in the middle of the mud just to try to make it so believable. And it's not even anything interesting, Usually with somebody with a costume, they're trying to do something interesting or scare somebody and, do lost footage. This is one of those cameras that you set up to, monitor birds or squirrels, not catch Bigfoot. Maybe was he trying to catch Bigfoot, or was this just random?
That's the thing, is like it kind of seems like it was a spontaneous occurrence, because as you know, these cameras kind of are fixated on tripods. That's why sometimes you'll get that, but it is stabilized footage. So what I will note is that possibly they were filming something else, but suddenly had the inspiration of seeing something, turning and trying to film it handheld. So that adds even more credibility that this was maybe more so spontaneous.
So was this placed, or was he holding the camera?
So you guys don't know much about this story?
I don't know.
Okay, so from what I can remember, there's a Monster Quest or something like that went through this whole video. So the other thing besides the fur point, is the way it walks. They did, like, how the Xbox reads you and makes like a little stick man or whatever. So they did that on this person's body, or the Sasquatch's body, and realized that its hips were different than a human, the way it was walking. And then the whole story before this was, I think, okay, so I don't know their names, but they were on horseback. It was two guys. they're on horseback, and the original video is a lot shakier than this. They just stabilized it. You know, he was he did film it by hand, and from what I got from the story, they just ran up on this person on horseback or Sasquatch, whatever. But then you have to go to the history of the person who filmed this. I'm not exact, but there was some kind of like controversy about he already had film experience before this Sasquatch video was made. So there, I don't know, you know, people always get slammed down, but yeah, there's a lot more to this film. I'll try to figure out if it was on Monster Quest or not, but yeah, they
I
did
just
a
kind
whole
of
detailed it.
I find it funny that he's mocking the cameraman by looking back. Like
Well,
that's
give a weird. We have the other two. We have two more graphics that kind of go into deeper detail. The next one that you can show, basically, it's a attempt at a recreation using only costumes found within the 60s. And it just looks completely way more artificial than the one that we're watching today. So I think it's a good contrast to see what's going on there.
It was
Let's
like
go
a
back
Blues Brother
there.
gorilla.
How far is it? Is it all the way at the end? Because I don't, unless you just sent it to me. Yeah, I don't see that other.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can send it to you really quick. 1 second.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't get that one. Or those
Okay.
two.
But basically what you're going to see is the most accurate representation using only the proper stitching from the 60s and the actual materials that they had available to them. And he almost looks more like a Muppet. Like you can clearly see that what they created was a costume and that, yeah, back one. There you go. So on the left, you can see the best attempt.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you know what's interesting is you can kind of see like muscle definition on the original one, which is another thing that they wouldn't have consideration for if it was just a man in a costume.
Another thing to note, and this is just something interesting. I don't know if this is, I mean, you can very clearly see the chest area is very different from a human. And this might actually be a female.
Yeah. We don't know.
But yeah. It's fascinating to me. That really doesn't look like a man in a mask, personally.
If you go to the next slide, you can see a face shot of it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the sagittal crest is pretty cool. Little point on top of his head.
It's elongated. Interesting. So they took 3D scans of this thing's foot, too?
Yeah, casts exactly where it walked in the ground from the footage.
Fascinating. So, guys, do you think we've talked about enough about Bigfoot? Or is there one more thing that we can really discuss about this guy or this being?
I would say just leave Bigfoot alone. You know what I mean? Like I think I'm speaking for everyone here. Just leave him alone.
If you see him, wave. But leave him alone, I would say. So, all right, let me do this. All right, now we are on to the third. What would be considered the scariest? Oh, sorry, I gotta do this. What would be considered the scariest and most bloodthirsty out of known cryptids? So, circling back, honestly, what I would personally think of, going through all of this, seeing the, different ones that we've talked about, I would personally like to say, not like to say, but, from the stories that I've heard from friends, from, things that I've seen just in my own free time on YouTube, would be the scariest one is this guy right here. Because all of the stories that I've heard about him, all of the videos that I've seen about him, he's just flippin' scary. Because a lot of friends that I know are in the Canadian area, and the Wendigo lore is very, very famous. I wouldn't say almost scary famous, very scary famous. And their descriptions of them are very tall, very lanky, very bony, kind of got exposed, skin, usually wearing a deer skull with, as you can see, antlers. Sometimes they take on more weird forms. They're usually very arching. And they like to squeal a lot. They very much like to squeal. Junk, would you like to continue?
Yeah, so, well, you made a great point. The Wendigos are kind of a very ominous, creepy cryptid that if you saw, you'd want to scream because this is something of nightmares. And again, I have no personal experience or expertise in the Wendigo phenomena, but just researching them is enough to put a chill up your spine. And it's fascinating too because the more I did, the more I realized how they kind of it's in essence, if you think about Predator, it's the same kind of energy. It's like they made the dead remains or the skeletal remains trophies and they carry them around with them. So it's freaky. And when we talk about Wendigo or any kind of entity like them, we can see them more as a low vibrational entity, something that we can consider malevolent, because these things, unlike Bigfoot, are actually very different with their intention and how they actually place their energy into terrifying others, but also siphoning the energy of others. So it's just fascinating to see this. But as a secondary, I do want to mention, you said who is the most bloodthirsty, right? I would have to say, personally, I believe the chupacabra to be the most bloodthirsty because they have a track record for absolutely annihilating any surrounding animals in farm communities, and it's terrifying. I've even heard of them attacking a child. So in some cases, so they're freaky. They are definitely the most bloodthirsty, but I would say the Wendigos are probably the most terrifying. It's just fascinating.
So, talk about El Chupacabra. Do you know a little bit about its lore? The only thing I know about it is personally, and don't judge, but the Scooby-Doo movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we saw on the maps, again, kind of down in central Mexico, kind of on the southern border, and they're more so kind of dog breeds. That's how many people feature them. They've been known to walk on their back legs. But yeah, just as you see in the picture right there, arched back, very, very aggressive. Not necessarily elusive, but just more so dominant and territorial, from what I've researched. And they're freaky because, you know, you can go outside and think, oh, that's just a wild dog in some of these communities, and then realize that that is a very dark essence or presence before you, and it's something that you don't want to see. So the fact that there are stories of people waking up in the middle of the night hearing their flocks be absolutely massacred is a scary, scary tale. And even, you know, in the human cases as well, even more so, of missing children, etc. So it's freaky. And again, if you were just kind of an ignorant skeptic, you would just think it's a wild dog and not realize the severity of what you're dealing with.
Now, go. Whoever wants to talk, go. No? Okay. Go.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, I don't know much about the chupacabra, but if later on you want to go and show some of those videos of any possible creepy cryptids.
Yeah, we'll go into those. One quick question that I have about El Chupacabra, and really all of the other cryptids so far, since we've kind of talked about a wide range of them, touching on different ones, but really going into a few. What's the intelligent level with cryptids? So does it range, or are they all kind of higher or lower density in terms of that spectrum? Because we, you know, as we understand, you can reach a certain level within a darker density. But of course, you're limited at that level that you can pass. So my question to really either Junk or Clara, because this is kind of a density question and, you know, higher realms, can these cryptids really flow between the densities? And are they intelligent enough to, you know that they are phasing in between realities, or are they just kind of going with it, very animalistic instinct?
Well, okay, so they obviously have a resemblance to the animal kingdom. And I'm not going to say this in slight of actual animal intelligence, because animals are very, very intelligent and smart. But this is more so a level of awareness. A cryptid knows it's a cryptid. And that's the thing, is that's where the intention distorts, is when it's doing things out of its own self-volition. So what I see is that there is a very distinct polarization. Again, cryptids, from my perspective, are kind of physical thought form manifestations of their density of occupation. So if we're talking about anything just slightly above the third and, you know, into the lower astral, these could be crossovers. These could be the entities that actively communicate or interact with the earth plane, in that they're able to vibrationally transfer a lot faster than, you know, something of a higher density. And so they go about terrorizing and all of these things. But again, there is that clear differential between intention. And so looking at a Sasquatch, you can see them more as a high vibrational being, maybe not fifth, but I would probably say high fourth. And that's why they are, you know, kind of trying to preserve the aspect of free will by keeping their identity anonymous. But as far as, you know, Chupacabra goes, Wendigo, and others that we'll get into, it's apparent that they have no consideration of their mystery, as far as, you know, interacting with communities, interacting with environments, and it's more destructive. So to answer your question, Scoob, it is all about awareness. It's about knowing what you are and then actively identifying with that presence. And so animals are just animals. They're loving life. They're in the present moment doing their thing. But I think more so these kind of cryptids are purposefully seeking out destruction or, you know, just kind of like terrorizing acts of self-preservation.
All right. Wow, you answered it very beautifully.
Can I say something?
Of course.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up the malevolent nature of the cryptids. And I guess I would like to bring up, you know, spirits that, you know, are, let's say, lower entity energies, or spirits that feed off of the loosh or the negativity of humans. Would they be considered cryptids as well? Like, where's the line between cryptids and, you know, lower astral forms and stuff, you know?
Oh, was that a question?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that was a question for you.
Yeah, well, okay. Again, there's a clear, distinct difference between us and these beings, more animalistic in nature. And we are kind of just like these humanoid bipedal beings that have, I wouldn't say a greater purpose. I would just say a more focused, grounded purpose. And so, in short, to answer your question, I think a cryptid is more so a mystical being, a mythical, sorry, in the form of all of these things that we specified: dragons, dog, beasts, etc. So they wouldn't necessarily be considered 100% a humanoid, but there is, again, that connection. There's that bridge of malevolence in which, you know, somebody can have evil intention, but wouldn't necessarily make them a cryptid, because, you know, you can quite literally see them where they are. But I think the elusive nature also factors into this. It's kind of like, are these things that come and go, or are these things that consistently permeate our consciousness? And so, you know, it's not every day that you interact with a cryptid, which is why there's such a fascination and curiosity about them. So I would draw the line at the elusive nature of their presence. If it's something that's, you know, more animalistic or resembling that of an animal, that would consider that a cryptid. And then something more humanoid would just kind of be us.
What would be Mothman?
See, Scuba has his. I really want to. You know, this might be a good segue into Mothman if you want to do it.
Let's do it, because I don't know nothing about Mothman.
It was just the intelligence thing made me think about Mothman.
Well, Andrew, do you know anything about Mothman?
Not much, just from the movies and documentaries of what people have said about it, but I don't know too much about it, just how it's able to stalk and almost read the future. It's just kind of creepy.
Well, it's funny because Mothman has really only been seen very close and near military bases.
So, from my understanding about Mothman, I studied from the same remote viewing group that I listened to. They did a remote viewing on him, and they found that he was an interdimensional entity that basically pops in and out of different timelines. And he likes to pop up where there are major events happening that shift a timeline, whether it's someone dying or maybe something military, like a military event going on or something like that. And so or it could not necessarily on a global scale, but some sort of significant timeline shift. And it's kind of his existence is to observe these different timeline shifts. Now this is just what the remote viewing people said. I don't know if it's 100% accurate. There's different interpretations of Mothman, but that's what I got and what I know of him.
Junk, do you have anything to add about Mothman?
Well, yeah, I mean, if anything beyond speculation or sightings, I think we can just study the origin story, which, if you guys don't know, I'll just read it out for you now. And this is just a summary. It basically says, on November 15th, 1966, two young couples from Pleasant Point, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Mallette, told police they saw a large gray creature whose eyes glowed red when their car's headlights picked it up. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings, following their car while they were driving in an area outside of the town known as TNT area, a site of a former World War II munitions plant. During the next few days, other people reported similar sightings. Two volunteer firemen who saw it said it was a large bird with red eyes. Mason County Sheriff George Johnson commented that he believed the sightings were due to an unusually large heron, who he termed a, well, I'm not going to say that. Okay. Contractor Newell Partridge told Johnson that when he aimed a flashlight at the creature in a nearby field, his eyes glowed like bicycle reflectors. Additionally, he blamed buzzing noises from his television set and the disturbance of his German Shepherd dog on the creature. Wildlife biologist Robert L. Smith told reporters that descriptions and sightings all fit the sandhill crane, a large American crane almost as tall as a man with 7-foot wingspan, featuring circles of reddish round colored eyes, etc. So again, a clear case that we're seeing some kind of cover up, right? Like with everything. I mean, cryptids, they're only notorious because people understand that they're not being told the truth. And I find the fact fascinating that the first sighting was near a munitions plant, because there is almost guaranteed some kind of nuclear byproduct or some kind of atomic element there, which could always kind of factor into mutations, of course. And as far as being a human, I doubt it. I think this is maybe some kind of mutant, and more so a genetically experimented mutant. And Scoob, why don't you enlighten everyone on your theory, because I think it's pretty interesting. It might tie into this.
So Junk and I were talking the other day, and he was sending me a lot of different info on cryptids, and there was one particular photo that he sent me that, as I understood it, was what I would consider a genetically modified human. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm stepping in a little bit of doom and gloom dark territory, but it's necessary because it's unfortunately going on. So in deep underground military bases, or DUMBs, it is well understood that they are creating, or were, we don't know if they're mainly flooded out and destroyed by now, but regardless, they were creating genetically modified humans or different beings and combining and splicing different genes to just create a whole host of different mutants. Whether they were just a weird hybrid animal with human, or you have the idea of a Mothman, a man basically given the genes of moths, and the idea could be that this creature could have escaped, and the sightings were of it trying to run away. I'm sure it eventually got caught, as most of these creatures do, because people talk, and word of mouth in these government organizations spreads like wildfire. So I could very well see that they very quickly mopped this up and put it back to where it quote unquote belongs in their eyes. Now, where is it today? No idea. But that is an interesting theory that I would like to propose, because we can't forget about that element. We can't forget about that element because it's dark. The dark is very mysterious. Things can get amplified, and the shadow government, the deep state, whatever we want to call it, has done very nefarious things in the many, many, many complexes of underground military bases that they have. So that's my theory. That's my take. Do I believe a lot of these are those? No, of course not. This is a global phenomena, but I do believe that there is a mixture in the bunch.
Well, Scoop, to add on to that, I just wanted to also note that we get a lot of soft disclosure through our media, right? Our movies, our televisions. So a few of the things that we were brainstorming earlier was that if anybody's seen the movie Hellboy, specifically the original one, you can see that there are kind of secret projects below the government that are kind of in this nature, kind of harboring some kind of distortion of a humanoid figure that isn't entirely human, but isn't entirely animal. It's more so a creature. And it wouldn't be far-fetched to think that Mothman was one of these creations. And especially if you look at the wingspan, you can see that it can clearly fly. And if it's something that could have escaped, it'd be very hard to track down, let alone catch. So it's fascinating to think. And, how would you react seeing this thing in the sky? I'd be terrified. It's not like a Superman. It's not like a superhero that we need. This is a very disturbing thing. And I just believe that if it is in the case of a genetic experiment gone wrong or gone right, depending on the perspective, this could be something you don't want to necessarily cross your path because you don't know the intention. It could be absolutely wild, like a wild animal per se. And if it's flying in and stalking people, especially from the very first sighting, then chances are it's enacting some kind of hunter mentality. It's stalking prey and it's flying through the sky. So, and then of course the red eyes, like piercing red eyes. I don't think anything about that is subtle. I think it's very clear what the intention is behind that. So fascinating.
Reminds me of the movie Splice.
Yeah, but I mean, have you ever heard a story of Mothman hurting anyone? I beg to differ that it's either a neutral or benevolent creature. Because how many? I mean, we've all heard of the elusive sightings of Mothman, but just like Bigfoot, has it really hurt anyone?
Where is that
No.
one story of the kids in the mountain who went hiking, but that could have just been made up because that was also near a military base or whatever, too.
Yeah, they very easily could have gotten nabbed. So, one idea I now want to bring forward is, what is the similar theme that we're seeing with all of these cryptids? And that is, I don't want to say to scare the living shit out of every human they come in contact with, because that is naturally the case. I want to say the common theme with every single cryptid is its mysteriousness and how it relishes in its mysteriousness. You never, if it's intelligent, you never actually see it come out and just talk, just try to communicate. With Bigfoot, very easily could try to communicate. If they observe us as much as they do, all they would really have to do is just figure out how to give us a message instead of just, footprints and, staring at us. Chupacabra, that's more animalistic and, instinct. Wendigos, that's, as Junk said, that's very low density, not really trying, your best at it. It's trying to scare you. It relishes in your fear, and it, probably wants to have its way with you, whether that be eat you or cut you up or whatever a Wendigo actually does with somebody, because we would never know. Never know. So I would say that's probably the biggest one. They relish in their mysteriousness, and I don't want to say they get off on the idea that we're so afraid of them. I would say they understand that we're so afraid of them, and they have to keep this mysteriousness as much as they like it, because they get to be in peace most of the time. Anybody want to add on to that one? Xander?
I'm here. My phone's having difficulty. I can hear you now.
Technical difficulties, no worries. Andrea, you've been kind of quiet. What do you think? Okay. Andrew, what do you think?
I forget the question. What was it?
What is the similar theme with all of these cryptids?
I guess just like you said, the mysteriousness, and like with the Mothman and everybody, they just want to be left alone, basically. Sasquatch just doesn't want to be seen. The Mothman has to act out of anger, read the timeline, the future, to try to say, just, leave me alone. I know what's going on, stuff like that.
But then you have something like Chupacabra or a Wendigo or a Jinn, going into, the really big mystical part of cryptids. You have the Jinn, who are literally granting people, a reverse wishes on people, kind of giving them what they want in their mind and slowly killing them.
Yeah, there's like vampires, and there's like different levels. Well, like, sucking the spirit from you, actually going out and searching for it. Yeah.
So you know what? You just brought up a very interesting point. You just blew my mind with that. So I'm going to completely disregard what I just said about their mysteriousness. The most common theme with all cryptids, in my opinion, is the nature that they're so diversive. And what I mean by that is, you look at every single one of them, even the scary ones, even the low density ones, even the ones that are working in animalistic natures. And they're either wanting to be left alone, living in nature, doing their thing, or they're trying to feed off of you. And that's kind of very representative of energies just in general, if you really think about it. You have the benevolent type of loving energy that you have to invite, you have to open yourself to, whereas you have the malicious energy that is trying to suck you away, eat you alive, and bring you to a dark place. Trying to go a little spiritual there. Junk, what do you think?
Well, again, we have a very clear mix of benevolent and malevolent. And I think just for the sake of it, if you want to run through, we do have the Loch Ness Monster, some graphics. I would consider the Loch Ness Monster more of a benevolent force. Again, it's something that isn't bothering anyone, just doing its own thing. Elusive, yes, but there's no malintent. And it's fascinating to even consider how the Loch Ness monster got there, if it is indeed a cryptid, and if it's not just an ancient being or creature that ended up in that lake, because we do talk about a flood. And there's consideration that that lake didn't exist before until there was a large surge or body of water that was introduced. But over the years, lots of people have been searching for the Loch Ness, and the picture you're seeing in the very center is actually sonar. So somebody actually caught that. So the creature is out there. It's not artificial. It's not a swan neck. It's a very real being, whatever it is. It's very long. It's large. It resembles something like a kind of like hybrid between sea serpent, underwater dragon kind of thing. Yeah,
So
exactly.
The one to the right really best describes what you're trying to talk about.
And I want to get the exact. Hold on one second. Let me look this up really quick. Because so the max depth at Loch Ness, which is not Loch Ness, it's Loch named Ness. So I just want to make that clear for everyone. Is 227 meters. So whatever this creature is, it has plenty of room to hide, plenty of room to just be its own thing, swim around. And if it is indeed stuck in this loch, then chances are it's going to be seen resurfacing every so often. And I just thought this was fascinating because all of the lore is very gentle about this creature. There's nothing, there hasn't been any accidents, there hasn't been any drownings, nothing like that. It's just being itself, and I think that's absolutely fascinating. I'm not sure if anybody else has heard of the Loch Ness Monster, but yeah, very, very interesting.
That would be another Scooby-Doo movie for me.
What do you
Speaking
mean?
of, oh no, Andrew, go for it.
Oh, I mean, what do you mean Scooby-Doo movie? Like,
there's a Scooby-Doo movie on Chupacabra and on Loch Ness Monster.
Okay, I used to go to Lake Tahoe in California all the time every year, and they have a Loch Ness Monster storyline up there too. But yeah, these lakes and everything, like I don't think they even know the bottom of Lake Tahoe, and maybe these animals are just smart enough to, from the flood, to go into these places to repopulate. I guess, I don't know, and not be a predator, but be the top dog in the lake.
Look, there are creatures so massive at the bottom of the ocean that it's incomprehensible.
I mean, and even from a 3D scientific perspective, scientists are discovering new species every day, whether it's bugs, animals, or sea creatures. I mean, 10 years ago, the giant squid was a myth, but we found the giant squid. So there's so many unanswered questions that we're inching closer to day by day.
I guess that very much kind of leads us into the Kraken talk. Junk, do you want to talk about the Kraken?
Well, aside from being a plot point in almost every Pirates of the Caribbean movie, the Kraken was seen by sailors, and these are people that, quote unquote, went to the ends of the world, these brave explorers, and the deep ocean is nothing to mess with. There are things out there. And as you'll see in the next slide, we're gonna dive deeper into this, but the most notable characteristics of the Kraken, of course, the tentacles, absolutely massive body. And just recently, the picture you're looking at right now is confirmed existence of the giant squid, which is huge, monstrous huge, like something that you would not want to see. And it begs the question: is the kraken just a kind of primordial giant squid that was larger than the rest of its family? Which could definitely be the case. Or the Kraken could be its own cryptid, its own thing that actually continues to exist in very, very deep, unexplored waters. But nevertheless, tale goes that it's sunk ships. It's taken people under, it's drowned people. So again, malicious intent. But maybe it's more territorial. Maybe it's something where people were embarking in its space and it didn't want people in its space. And then, as you're seeing here, are fossilized remains of evidence that there was indeed either a very giant squid or the kraken itself, or a lineage of the kraken. If it's not just one being, it's many, as kind of as we see with the Sasquatch and many other cryptids, that it's not just one being. Chances are it's kind of like a successive generational thing. So,
and I also want to make note that it's fascinating because if you go into the science of octopi and how squids generally work, they in themselves are not originated from this planet. It is thought that they came from their eggs came from an asteroid, but either way, they're not originally from this world, and they're artificial as we are. Technically, that's a whole nother topic, but we've gone into that. We'll probably go into it again. But not only does a squid or octopus have its main brain, but each tentacle has its own brain. So I'm going to say that again. Not only does an octopus or a squid have its main brain in its head, each tentacle has its own brain that works independently. So that's how synchronous that being is with all of the different minds that it has to deal with. It's fascinating if you really think about it.
Yeah, they're very complex beings, and to kind of think of something on a mass scale, something the size of a 5-story building, I mean, you could just let your mind wander with that one. But Scoob, while we're in the aquatic area of this conversation, we can also talk about mermaids, which is something a lot of people never really considered to be a cryptid. But again, they're elusive nature. Their stories that span the test of time is something that's very fascinating, and it's always begged the question: are they as human looking as we believe? Or is it just kind of the mirage effect of the on-seekers, of seeing something in the shape of a human that could resemble like a humanoid figure? And again, mermaids all around the world. This isn't local to one area, but it's very closely associated with the coasts, close to land-ish, not like deep, deep sea. And what's creepy, I saw this video, maybe somebody else has seen it too, but it's this guy who's just, arrogantly going out onto a dock at, I think, like 3 a.m. And he just starts going to the end of the dock, and it's almost pitch black out, and he's calling out, and you just hear these like wailing sounds of like, it just gives you chills to hear it. And nearly every comment on the video was basically describing, it's like, hey, you got to get out of there. Like, those are sirens. And again, sirens is synonymous with mermaids. It's the same in one. But as legend goes, they seduce man to drown them or to kill them. So who knows? Who knows what's the truth? All I know is that at one point or another within the timeline of human history, there has been several sightings of mermaids. Otherwise, we wouldn't have movies like The Little Mermaid. And that's the whole point, is that If cryptids were nothing but just a fun little story, they wouldn't pervade that much into our modern day culture. They would fade off hundreds of years ago. But the fact that they're here right now in 2022 has to tell you something, has to tell you that there is a very real possibility that these beings are actively engaging with humanity, whether it's consensual or if it's, you know, more so a surprise, something that they've been drawn into accidentally. So I would love to get everybody else's take on this because it's very, very interesting.
I think it's really fascinating what you just said in terms of like the connected brain, and like there's a comparison that I'll put about to the octopus to humans. It's like I feel like when one human sees these type of creatures, we all kind of see it, and I feel like it gets put in the collective memory, whatever we all access, whatever we all share in terms of consciousness.
Can you move closer to your mic?
I think there's a certain fascination that when one person or a few people see something, it gets stuck in the collective, and I think that's why we keep coming back to it. You know, it's very true that some of these creatures, no matter what culture you go to, what country, doesn't matter what location, they have their own ritual, they have their own folklore, their own rituals, their own ideas, and you know, sometimes they connect, even if it's vastly different cultures or very far away places.
No, 100%. And, you know, one thing I want to make note about the mermaid thing is, although media likes to portray these beings as something, you know, funny, malevolent, or benevolent, not malevolent, benevolent, and something that, you know, you can trust in a way, you should never trust these beings. You should never try to even really think about engaging with them, because, you know, you're disrupting them, they're disrupting you, and in a way they may not even need to want to be there. You know, it may be on accident, because as we said, a lot of them are multidimensional, so they're passing through different realities constantly. And that brings me on to the last question of the topic. Do we need any special equipment to see these beings clearly, or should we try to follow the planetary portal grid? And that is a very interesting, you know, point that we need to really think about and boil down. You know, this is such a global scale, and I was looking at that map, and a lot of those points that they are really focal in is where the portals of the Earth are the most active at different points in time, because it's in flux. It's never one point on the grid has a portal, you know, longer than the other, and it's only really for a few days, maybe a few hours. It's always fast, it's always moving, and it's always changing, unless a Stargate is opened. That is a completely different scenario. That's using the planetary's energy in itself to do that. That's a whole nother topic that, again, we will go into at a later time. But do we need any special equipment? No. But what we can do is follow patterns. We can very well follow patterns. We can very well follow past sightings. And, you know, if you're really, you know, if you out there are really into needing to find Bigfoot or Chupacabra or a Wendigo, be my guest. But make sure you're strapped. Make sure you have enough food. Make sure you have the right kind of equipment, not some shoddy cell phone camera. And please be safe, and God be with you. But I don't recommend it. I don't condone it. But I can condone being curious about it, and I can condone, you know, being in the idea of if you happen to come upon it, be smart. And if you want to, try to get footage of it, go for it, but value your life and be safe. Does anybody else want to add anything?
Well,
Go ahead, Junk.
Well, I'm just going to say, by definition, aliens are considered cryptids, right? So, oh, wait, hold on. I'm hearing an echo. Testing. Okay, cool. So, in that regard, there are ways. So, to answer your question, Scoob, do we need special equipment? Yes and no. It all depends. If you want a genuine, honest encounter, go to a tribe, be there overnight where all of these tales are told, where they say, don't go out after this hour, go out after that hour, and have whatever experience you want. But chances are that's not going to be positive. I would suggest, though, if we're talking about mechanical technology or some kind of cloaking software, your best chance at sighting a UFO per se would be through the infrared realm of a scope, either a scope or a camera. You can check that out that way. Or if you want to have an encounter with Bigfoot, again, not preferred, because you'd never know how they're going to react, especially if they're very sensitive to energy. They're going to react to how they perceive you. And I've heard many horror stories where people go out camping and they feel threatened, so they go to explore the camp up close. And who wants a 9 foot tall giant being above your campsite in the middle of the night? It's terrifying, traumatizing. So again, at your own discretion, using caution, everything that Scuba said. But I know the curious mind loves to seek, and we are absolutely all there for that. We do advocate for curiosity. But there are many different ways of doing this. Research, again, thousands of videos online, sightings, etc. Just start to browse, go through, again, let energetic resonance take place. If you feel something, if you feel an attachment, if you feel authenticity, chances are you'll get spiritual chills. You'll feel a very emotional reaction to the sighting. Otherwise, you can pretty much discern what's true and what's a hoax. And then speaking also on the grid system, chances are if it's a more benevolent being, they're naturally going to be drawn to these regions of the planet that just because they're hot spots for high vibrational energy. But I wouldn't consider a chupacabra going to, Sedona, for example. It just doesn't make any sense. They're more so wild. You can see malevolence as a wild, wandering force, and benevolence is more of an anchored, grounded space where they kind of are fixed in certain regions and have a purpose to fulfill, which is another thing that you should be considering when we discuss Sasquatch and whatnot. But yeah, you can see them with your bare eyes, but it's only if they want you to see them, and that's the real case.
So I think, are there any more comments? Andrew?
Yeah. About the cryptids, I'm more about the humanoid thing. Ones, mermaids. We do have these genetic mutations that are actually like physical. People's legs can be fused. Some people have webbed toes or webbed hands. That would be more mermaids. But with Sasquatch, I mean, humans do have the genetic mutation where they're growing like thick hair all over their body. So there is some kind of connection to these things to where there is that mermaid discovery movie where it was if we were apes or whatever, there was a split off from a line where these beings, some stayed on land, some started noticing that they had more of a food abundance in the ocean, stayed in the ocean longer and longer. And we actually have human beings who can see under the water just like if you had goggles on. It's like a floating tribe or something like that. It's a really cool technique, and we're, evolution, but we do have these certain things that kind of can prove this stuff is true or not just by genetic mutations. So I I don't know. That's all I have to say about that, really.
Are there any final comments or questions? Going once.
Oh yeah, Scoop, you wanna show the last remaining cryptids just for the fun of it? We have the Jersey Devil, Skinwalkers. I believe those are the last two.
Yeah. So we got Skinwalkers. These, I think we're going to go into a full video about. We really want to talk about these, but there were so many others that we needed to talk about to really get this conversation formulated. So for Skinwalkers, we're going to dedicate a whole video and a whole conversation to those at some point, very much in the near future. Different drawings of that. Now, I've never heard of the Jersey Devil.
It looks funny, but it's also extremely freaky at the same time. It's basically a goat with wings.
Ooh.
Yeah, but it's in Jersey. People have seen it, and very creepy. You wouldn't want to stumble across that, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't. All right. So, as a little bit of a tradition here at New Templars Mystery School, we usually and will continue to end the night off talking about a very specific subject and taking a nice good old look at it. As I get it pulled up here. Look at how active our sun is, everybody. Holy crap. Even messed up the footage there a little bit. Let me get this on repeating mode. Look at that. So we have been in a very energetic time these last few days. We're going to continue to be in an energetic time. Thankfully, there are no solar flares directed at Earth. They keep exploding past us. But yeah, we have a very active sun, ladies and gentlemen. It is not quiet.
We recently had an X flare. Scuba, I just sent you the video of that if you want to take a closer look, because it's pretty incredible it's intense. It was a 1.6, and I believe the maximum X flare, which if you don't know anything about flares, X flares are the most powerful class of flare that we have on the sun. And the most recent one we had just a couple of days ago was, I believe, a 1.06, if I'm right. And then the most powerful on record was back in 2003. It was a X28. So extreme stuff.
Yeah, it is. Let me get this. So look at that. X class solar flare. And it's just kind of giving you a perspective of where Earth is in relation to this thing popping off, and just how flippin' tiny we are compared to that big old ball of plasma.
hit the Earth, how long would it take from the explosion to when it would reach Earth?
Miss Cruz, would you like to answer that? If she can unmute. It depends upon the explosion.
Roughly like 2 or 3 days. That's when you get the full effect of it. Because it depends. Like the flare itself, as you can see, is more so an energetic release. But when we get CMEs, which are coronal mass ejections, that's when you get actual kind of like balls and like huge clouds, gas particles that hit us. So
CMEs, big ones, could be upwards to maybe a day to, I hate to be doom and gloom, but if it's really, really bad, 45 minutes. It really depends, because the sun, it really depends upon what it does, because, you know, it could be not directed at us, so that would, for it to take longer because it's got to expel the stuff. Now, if it's directed at us, that is like straight up just shooting a laser beam at us that, you know, has to travel, and it would be traveling at such an accelerated speed that we wouldn't be able to comprehend it. But to really answer your question, it varies, and it, you know, it depends upon the magnitude of the explosion on the sun. Any more? Anything else I can't talk. My apologies. Anything else anything else anyone would like to say? Goodness gracious, words.
I do have a question where they've talked about a couple of meteors. And are those false flags? Are those real? Because I guess I would expect to see more or hear the urgency when they talked about it, when I have heard little bits about it.
So one thing to note is, although we're still we're going through a magnetic pole shift that is a progressive process, we still have an ozone, we still have an atmosphere, we still have a protective shield that doesn't just go away. So a lot of the times they overhype this stuff, and, you know, most of the time meteors burn up an atmosphere. A lot of the times they're so tiny that it's minute. You know, it's really hard for a big chunk of rock to get through the planet's atmosphere because it's so thick. They have to go through so much. And, you know, as much crap as we give never a straight answer, the guys that got to the moon, regardless of what we saw, because they really did go there, the guys that got to the moon were some of the smartest people on Earth. Sad to say, a lot of them were Nazis, but they were the smartest people on Earth. And, you know, they had to face many, 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 many challenges. And one of them being is return. Because getting out of the planet's atmosphere is flipping easy. You just got to keep going. Coming back in, that's the tricky part, because that's when it gets super, 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 super hot. You know, you're basically pushing against a shield and trying to rip a hole in it to let you in. And, you know, you put tension on a rubber band, it's going to eventually try to spring you back. That's essentially what it's trying to really do, is propel it back. But, you know, the object is going usually so fast that, of course, it's not going to be able to push it back, but it's still going to give it enough force to try and push through for it to either blow up or cease to exist. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. there anything else, guys? No? Well,
No. I was gonna say no. No for me.
oh, all right. Well, thank you all for coming to our very first Halloween special. We have many more in the works. We have a whole month to talk about things that are spooky, crawly, scary, and just plain weird. So thank you all for coming. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your week. Now to go into a little bit of a doom and gloom topic, since we are in the month of Red October and things are very testy, if comms go out and we are at a point in time where the EBA or the EBS is activated, I want you all to know that we will be right back here as soon as communications come on that next Wednesday, and we will be discussing, and we will be right here, and we will be together, and we'll be stronger together. Mystery School will not falter during any point until the internet goes down, until we physically have no access to communicate to each other in a digital way. Mystery School is going nowhere. And will go through many changes, but it is going nowhere. So I thank you all. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Have a wonderful night, and have a wonderful rest of your week. And as always, keep on seeking.